This is the Roots and All Budcast, presented by Sarah Wilson.
Hi, and welcome to this week's Budcast. I'm quite excited today because I've just come back from an interview with Craig Sams, who is the founder of Carbon Gold, which is a biochar product that you can use in your garden. And it was a really interesting interview, so I look forward to sharing that with you soon. First up this week, I asked you to send me your questions, and I got two lovely questions, so thank you for those. The first was from Sophie, who asked me what she should be doing in her herbaceous borders at this time of year. And the answer for me is nothing really. The most I'll be doing is cleaning up the few odd broken stems that might be hanging around the place. I might do a bit of deadheading, but probably not, because by the time the plants put out new flowers, the frosts will no doubt be here, and that will finish off the flowers on a lot of the herbaceous perennials anyway. I might be getting ready to lift my dahlias or mulch them if I'm leaving them in situ, and I wrote a blog post about that, in particular using a brand of mulch called Strolch. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, it's probably worth a look at the Roots and All website. I might also be tempted to remove any rose leaves that are especially full of black spot, and I'd also be continuing to collect up any rose leaves that have fallen around the base of the plant. If you look at the undersides of these leaves, you might find raised black spots, which are the things responsible for spreading this fungus around. So definitely get rid of those, and don't put them on your compost heap if you can help it. Put them in your green waste bin or on the burning pile, because the fungus will overwinter on these leaves, and if you spread them around again as compost next year, you'll be spreading the problem further. Sophie was asking if she should be cutting back the perennials that have turned brown and died back. But again, I would say no for two reasons, really. The first is that these dead bits of plant provide a refuge for overwintering insects, but they also provide protection to the crown of the plant over the winter. So I realise a lot of my gardening advice is to leave things as they are, which probably drives the tidy-minded to distraction, but I'm all for an easy life and conservation of energy. So just probably let your herbaceous border do its thing now until things start waking up in February or March time next year. So thank you for your question, Sophie, and I hope that helps. My next question is from the fabulous Tim, who asks when he should be pruning his pieris. I am no pieris expert, so I called Morley's Nurseries in Norfolk, who specialise in growing and propagating a wide range of ericaceous loving species, of which pieris is one. They were incredibly helpful and knowledgeable, so a shout out to them. Their website is morley-nurseries.co.uk if you'd like to check them out. They are a wholesale nursery, but they've got some good information on there. And I spoke to Andy Tillett over there, and I asked him when is the best time to prune your pieris, and he reckons springtime, which he says is March to early April, after they've flowered and the flowers are starting to die back. If you prune them at this time, the new growth comes through fairly quickly, so they won't look too sad for very long, even if you take a fair bit off. Andy cautioned that they are susceptible to late frosts. If the frost gets into a cut, you may find the limbs can start to die back. So if the weather's looking iffy, or if you live further north, I might be mindful of this. Andy said if you look on the branch for a growth point, make the cut just above these, and the new growth will originate from this point, giving you a bushier, more compact plant. He also said you may find that you get one or two shoots that grow up taller than the rest of the plant, and he said to cut these down to the same height as the rest of the shrub, so you get a better overall shaped bush. I asked Andy if you could take cuttings of the shrub at this time, at the same time that you pruned it with the offcuts, but he said no, you'd need to take cuttings in late summer to autumn time. So he said as early as August and then all the way up until November. And he said it's best to put your cuttings on a windowsill, and within 4 weeks of taking the cutting, they should have put on roots. And at the nursery, they don't even worry about using hormone rooting powder. And then in about 3 months, you should be able to pot them on. And Andy said the key to success with pieris cuttings is to use soft material, not hardwood. So that was interesting. I asked if he would feed the plant after pruning, and he said he would, using a general purpose slow release fertiliser, and you may possibly need to provide the plant with a feed specifically for ericaceous plants. So a big thank you to Andy for his excellent advice. It's always a pleasure to speak to experts. And Tim, thank you for your question. I hope that answers it. So going back to what you can do in your garden in October, it struck me the other morning that October is one of the best months to take photographs of your plants. If you've been on my Instagram lately, which is Roots and All Pod, you may have seen a picture I took of some inula at Great Dixter. They're the big, huge, tall yellow flowers. And I sneaked into the garden early one October morning and I took some of the best pictures I've ever taken of a garden. And it looked magical. And I think it was for several reasons. Firstly, the borders are fit to bursting at this time of year at Dixter, but also a lot of other gardens that make use of late season perennials and grasses are the same. And secondly, there seems to be 1 or 2 days each October where the day starts out hazy. It's one of those really warm October days where the haze burns off and it turns into a really warm day. But the way the light is diffused by the moist air early on in the day gives everything an ethereal glow. And looking back through my folder of garden photographs, I can see that some of the best are taken in October. So there's still time to get out and take some lovely photographs. And talking of Great Dixter, I went to the plant fair there a couple of weekends ago and I bought some unusual bits. I was very excited to get hold of a hardy tapioca or a manihot grey amii, which although it can be grown outside, I'm going to keep it indoors over winter and maybe pop it outdoors next year. I got some other bits too. If you're interested, keep an eye on the Instagram again because I've posted some videos and some pictures of them on there. And 2 things that struck me as a result of going to the plant fair. I know I go on about supporting local independent nurseries, but for some nurseries, plant fairs are their main or their only route to market these days. A nursery that's very local to me no longer opens to the public. They sell solely at fairs and they have some amazing and rare plants. It's important to support these independent growers because they're often propagating unusual varieties that aren't necessarily of interest on a large commercial scale, but are nonetheless important and of interest to plant buyers, especially those of us who appreciate something a little bit unusual. So you don't want to lose those varieties. We really need to support those nurseries. And the other thing that struck me is the flip side of plant fairs is that they can be a little bit intimidating if you don't know what you're looking for or you're not necessarily that up on your plants. And there's a thing that's known as plant snobbery, which most of us are capable of exhibiting because I think we've probably all got a bit sniffy about our neighbours' pink petunia and orange begonia pot displays. But sometimes plant people can seem a little bit unapproachable if you're a novice. And at plant fairs, people sometimes can engage in a bit of one-upmanship with their plant knowledge and they're all trying to sound terribly clever and well-informed. But if you ignore the people who ponce about trying to look important and speak to the actual stall holders and even other plant fair visitors, I am certain that you'll find lots of them are incredibly generous with their knowledge. Gardeners and plants people on the whole are just so enthusiastic about plants that they're happy to show their passion and to share information with anyone who listens. So, don't feel intimidated when you go to a plant fair. Not everybody is at the same level of plant expert knowledge. So just a few bits of housekeeping. I can see from my download stats that there are a few of you listening each episode, and for that I thank you. It's a privilege to be speaking to you. I love getting information out there and I especially love interviewing guests, which is why I'm going to be upping the frequency of the main podcast episodes to fortnightly. And that means as of next week you'll be receiving the Budcast and the podcast on alternate weeks. And there are 2 reasons I'm doing this, really. The first is, as I say, because I love speaking to garden experts. And the second is because I have so many interesting, exciting people that I've either already interviewed or I have lined up to interview in the near future, that without publishing more frequently, I won't be able to get all this fabulous content out to you. So I hope you feel this is a good move for the podcast, and I hope you'll be happy to get more content, obviously, because the main episodes are around 30 minutes and the podcast they'll be replacing is around 10. And if you do appreciate the extra content and the work involved, could I please ask that you do me 2 favours? Firstly, could you please email me suggestions for future guests or future episode topics you'd like to hear to podcast@rootsandall.co.uk. There are hundreds, probably thousands of guests I'd like to interview, and even more topics I can think of that I'd like to cover, but it's not all about me. I'm here to provide information that you want to hear and that you find useful, so please do that if you can. And secondly, if you have a spare couple of seconds and you're listening in iTunes or Apple Podcasts, as it's now called, could you please rate the podcast? You don't have to write a review, but that does help. But I would say, please only do that if you're going to give me 5 stars, because some gave me 4 stars and spoiled my 100% 5-star record. So thanks for that. And that's it from me this week. And I hope you have a wonderful week. Don't forget to tune in next week, because I haven't decided for certain, but I think the main podcast episode is going to be with a wonderful man called Terry, who runs a pest control business with a difference. So be sure to tune in for that. Have a great week, and I'll catch you next Tuesday.
For more information, visit the Roots and All website at rootsandall.co.uk. To download more episodes, visit iTunes, your favourite podcast provider, or get them direct from our website.